after lunch. I hope you enjoyed some inspiring conversations and amazing dessert and are now feeling re-energized again to do a little interactive workshop session with us around SharePoint and Valo intranet. My name is Felicia, and I also brought support in the form of Lara, who will help me gather your feedback and ideas and insights, record them on flip charts so we can take them back home with us later. If you feel like you want to move forward a little bit, because it's more of a workshop, we won't use an audience mic, we are a very small group, and just moving forward a couple of rows might make the conversation easier if you don't feel uncomfortable with that. Cool. Thank you. All right. Clicker. Okay, cool. All right, before we're diving into the work and into the topic, I feel like I have to make some things clear first and set the stage, because I'm very amazed and curious about all the SharePoint and Microsoft knowledge here in this room. But you have to be aware that I'm not a SharePoint expert myself. I didn't write a book on intranets, unlike Frank, so I'm not an intranet consultant, and I'm also not a sales executive. So you might think, what am I doing here? My view of Valo intranet and SharePoint is a very strategic one. My work revolves around positioning SharePoint and Valo in this intersecting area between the digital workplace and internal communications, which is really crucial for us as Staffbase to get right, and which I think is very, based on the conversations we had today, is the main area of your operation as a partner as well. So I'm really working on this, and my mission is to generate a broad understanding of SharePoint, Valo intranet, the market, and the product market fit. And at Staffbase, my role is called go-to-market strategy. And that sounds really big, and it can mean a lot of things, and it is actually a lot of things. But for the purpose of today, in today's context, it's mostly around creating sales stories in the form of pitches, then joining sales calls, doing pitches myself, or observing our sales crew doing the pitches for me, or joining calls with Frank and learning, and then reiterating. And reiterating means I'm refining the pitch continuously, and the other point is I'm giving feedback for actually product strategy and product development. And what I want to do today, I had a very steep learning curve in the past 10 months. And what I want to do is share my learnings with you and some results that came out of this. I want to make you understand how we arrived at this repositioning phase that we are in right now. And I also want to ask you about all of your insights and learnings, expectations, and ideas around Valo intranet and its future actually in this digital workplace and comms discussion. All right. So when we talk about value-based selling, it revolves around the idea that a product is actually not a list of features, but it's around the values it provides for different customers. So the logical step that follows is the value always depends on the person you're talking to, on the type of customer. So this is why we differentiate between different buyer personas, and we really want to understand them deeply. As Frank already mentioned, a couple of the most important ones is, of course, internal comms, IT. These are the ones we see most in these Valo intranet deals, but also the user as the kind of internal customer of both internal comms and IT. One, just context information here is when we talk about Valo, why are we pitching Valo, how are we pitching Valo at Staffbase? When I talk about Valo pitches, these are these 15 to 20 minute high-level pitches in order for us to understand if the product is actually a possible fit for the customer before pulling in a partner. So we won't give a full-blown demo, but it's really about check if there is a fit and making easily and concisely understood what the product is about and what it can deliver. Okay, coming back to personas, we differentiate between above the line and below the line personas. For the sake of brevity, I summarized the main important points here on the slide. But with regard to internal comms, it's our most important buyer persona as of right now as Staffbase. We We really, these are our champions. Everything we did in the past was to make their lives easier and to make them excel at their work. Above the line, internal comms personas have very leadership, strategic roles, driving strategic initiatives. They are ideally working very closely with leadership and enabling leaders to become good communicators. They are experts for their internal audiences, and they take care that the right comms channel mix is in place in order to reach the right employees in a very targeted manner at the right time. And one of their main challenges in their work is fighting confusion, especially around global and local messaging, for example, that can be conflicting, as you know. Below the line personas in internal comms, they are more like working in the form of campaigns. They do have crisis communications with ad hoc messaging. They have to actively gather data and measure the success of their work. They have to make sure that they can actually achieve and really manage their workload. And what this means, for example, is that when a company has a SharePoint intranet and they feel an employee app might really be helpful to read the front line, then what it means for these personas is like, okay, great, we'll have another channel. It's going to be a lot of redundant work. I'm going to have to create the same news in two systems. I'm going to gather the data in two systems. And like, how will this work? And this is one reason why this integration story and our creating very seamless integrations between Staffbase and SharePoint is really crucial for us to get it right for these personas, because we actually don't want redundancy. This is the big thing we are fighting with everything we do here in the integration work between SharePoint and Staffbase. Then switching over to the IT persona, they're always usually part of our deal, sometimes more involved, sometimes less, always gatekeepers. They are partnering with internal comms usually to make sure internal comms have all their tools in place to actually achieve their goals. But they are also serving, of course, employees and provide them with resources and services internally. Their work is a lot about compliance and security. It's around designing an IT infrastructure that is in the most consolidated, integrated way and makes sense for employees. And daily job, of course, is to keep systems running. Like everything has to be stable at all times. And then we have employees, the user. I mean, we're all users ourselves, and I guess what we wish for is, like, in terms of resources and what we wish from SharePoint is that we have easy access to everything we need. We understand where things are. Like, one of the main challenges we see with digital workplace designs is not necessarily that the projects are too complex because it's too many tools, but because the use cases aren't clear. Like, for a user, where would I go? Like, it has to be really clear for me, where would I go to find my employee handbook? Do I go to SharePoint? Do I go into a Teams channel? Do I go to Viva Connections? Do I go to my front door intranet? Like, these are really important questions we have to solve, and companies have to find good answers for. Also, they want to stay informed about developments, of course, on a global strategic company level, but at their own really relevant local level as well. And they ideally want to connect with coworkers and have a voice in the company. And what we do from here, like having understood our personas, and as I'm saying, we're constantly learning about them, we now ask ourselves, what are their pains with SharePoint? Like, what are actually the things they can't do right now, they are unhappy about, and that a product like Valo Intranet would solve? Because as we're talking about Valo Intranet as an add-on to SharePoint, there must be some underlying things that are not working. And we have some hypotheses here. We have an understanding, and we generated here some insights. But before sharing our top 3 pains for these personas with SharePoint, I would be really curious to hear about your view. Like, what's going wrong in SharePoint for them? Okay, I already saw a hand. That's great. Can we do it without audience mic? Does it work? Yeah.
So we did a whole series of interviews for a large tech company around their SharePoint site, and we heard things like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be paying attention to, a big black hole. That was a big one. I think about 10 minutes ago.
That's very interesting with search. What we all know, I guess, is Microsoft Search is really powerful. But if you enter travel expense and you get 400 results, then that's also not very much like serving your purpose, right? Like it's really slowing you down in your everyday life. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah.
Search. In my opinion, it's counterproductive when you think about SharePoint search because it's different than Google search.
Yeah.
And people try to use their private experience searching inside SharePoint, it doesn't work very well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not the user experience doesn't really work for SharePoint search. Okay.
It's the whole setting, so the scope, so the SharePoint search, I think the quality of the search is there. It's the access controls are defined if you don't know what you have access to. Therefore, the part where the public search, like Jan was saying, is going to bring everything back.
Yeah.
You see it in your organization, you understand how it's done. And, but they don't understand it, they shouldn't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Cool. So that was a lot around the user perspective. What do you think about IT? Like, what is IT talking about when, like, they want to enter a Valo intranet project with you? What's their main motivation? What are they complaining about? Okay. Somebody has some ideas?
Get it from the table, we don't know the mission to work, make it as cheap as possible. And so we don't have any idea of supporting internet stuff, so do something that's easily supportable.
Okay.
IT stuff, most of the times, like, let's get this tool out of the wild and make it as less of a support effort as we have on the West End.
Okay, let's support. All right.
That's the main message.
Yeah, also that it's not in the main focus of IT, so they often want us to take over and internal comms, the main actor, on the terms of content creation, especially there, so some reasons there.
So they partially want to hand over ownership to internal comms in order to support them, having to support them less in the daily work. Yeah. Okay. All right. Internal comms. Do you see? Yeah.
All the time, it's also no additional software, please. We have a fixed toolkit, M365 most of the time, and we don't want any additional software. So, extension, okay, if it's something like Valo, stuff is always a little bit more difficult to say, because that's basically a new platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of the main hurdles to get over with IT stuff.
Yeah.
Very often they say, oh, no, additional platform.
Yeah. So with Valo, you can say it's running in your own tenant, it's running in your environment. No worries. Yeah. Okay.
For internal comms, they're concerned about the user experience. User experience is very good. If IT is controlling the SharePoint site, then they have no control over what goes where, and it's very frustrating. And they often need sometimes it's a team of one or two, and they don't have anybody with SharePoint expertise, so they feel helpless and frustrated.
Okay. So it sounds like you had very emotional conversations around SharePoint. Okay. Okay. All right. Does HR, so I didn't list here HR because we didn't see them in these deals a lot yet, but does HR play a role in your SharePoint projects, Valo intranet projects so far?
We group with internal comms most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Same group of interest, just with
Yeah.
a niche product, so to say. Very often HR is the first internal unit that is entering the intranet with additional information in addition to an HR page. If there's a workers' organization, and most of the time it's HR and generally we call it a feedback, so any workers union organizations.
Yeah.
The first two parts needing their own site in the internet, want to publish information. Easy to
HR system, like if it's Workday or ADP or this is solving our problem, we don't need SharePoint. So they end up almost over rotating on their, or being over dependent on their HR system to supply employees with information.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you for the great input. I'm gonna move on to what we work with so far in the past 10 months. So for internal comms, like when I started at Staffbase, I was like, okay, you're the SharePoint person now, you know, get this Microsoft topic straight for us. And like I tried to, like, what is SharePoint? And I booked a couple of classes and I looked at literature and I watched a lot of YouTube videos, so many SharePoint experts out there. And I tried to come up with like an information architecture, like what is SharePoint about, like if we can like draw a picture of it, how would it look like, right? And this is what I came up with and actually validated it with one of my teachers. And he says, yeah, that's about it. So it's, I mean, in the worst case, I guess one of the main problems for internal comms with SharePoint is that it's a very decentralized system by nature. And in the worst case, you work across multiple tenants, but you often have at least multiple hub sites in place, communication sites, team sites. And I highlighted the little yellow streaks here are actually where news are. Because news can be everywhere. Like you have, like once you publish something in SharePoint, like it's for internal comms, it can be really challenging to get a feeling of where things live, for how long, who is visiting it, to really have an overview. So the first bullet point is like really decentralized and complicated content creation, as you said. That also makes it hard for part-time editors to join. Like what we've heard a lot is that for the core comms team, once the onboarding or the process is in place, it's okay. But for part-time people who only do it once in a while, it's like they are rather pushing the work away to the main internal comms person or avoiding it altogether as much as they can. Targeting and personalization, it is very important in internal comms, and I know it can be done with SharePoint, but it's rather intuitive, non-intuitive. It's multiple steps. It relies on Microsoft groups. You have like it's more of an afterthought after you created content. So this is something we hear a lot, especially from prospects who want to move away from SharePoint, and this is one of the main arguments for Staffbase. Like I want to do better personalization and targeting. And then all this leads to usually low employee engagement. There are comment structures in place, there are some engagement functionalities, but usually employees are not really engaging. They're not making conversation in SharePoint. Yeah? You had
I'd say another thing that we've encountered, there's multiple sites, there's no single source of truth.
Yeah.
So employees also get confused, like where do I go to look for information and which is the right call?
Yeah, that's what I said, right, with what I meant also with the employee handbook. Like, where would it be? Where would that big container of all the most relevant stuff, where would that be? All right, for IT, what we see that SharePoint usually, they are very much involved with maintenance. It's a lot of clutter. It's often been growing into a bit of a monster, hard to control at a point. Often unclear, is it worth the time to really clean it up, or can I push it into some folder? Then customizations require resources, expert knowledge, and they might just break. With the next SharePoint update is what we heard a lot, so it's not really reliable. Once you've built your perfect SharePoint, it's like, okay, will that still be there with the next update? And then also, critical information is usually hard to find, and like it's hard to make things really visible. And then for users, so navigation is a central part of every intranet. It can often be disorienting. Information overload makes it hard to reach important content. So for example, if I have all my work documents, documentation, policy documents in SharePoint, actually an employee handbook is on a different level. Like where would I find this? What does the actual information hierarchy look like? And then usually also translations play a big role. Like a lot of SharePoint content is not available in my language and there are no translation possibilities. These are not all the pain points we heard so far, but these are the top 3 we've seen. Yeah?
That's why we use Valo.
Yeah. This is, I will come to this. We are going to talk about features.
This slide that I said before is
Yeah. 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 I also have to say, I focused on those pain points that relate to especially Valo intranet, because it's like, there's a storyline here. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Okay, that's a compliment. Thank you. So that means I got it right a little bit. So what we do after this, like mostly this is internal stuff until now, but then we enter pitch territory. And what's really challenging about these SharePoint sales for us is that with pitching Staffbase, it's usually like you pitch a product and the prospect expects you to pitch a product. But with SharePoint and Microsoft users, it can mean so many things. When somebody says, yeah, we're on Microsoft, this could mean they are even on SharePoint on-prem, they might have modern SharePoint, Teams might play a role or not, maybe just for chat, maybe they think about intranet and Teams, maybe they know about Viva Connections, maybe they don't, Viva Amplify, maybe already, we've seen it in some deals now, prospects mention it, but it's really difficult to understand where a prospect is and what their questions and pain points actually are, and where you kind of start your conversation journey with a prospect. So we use a slide like this, so I used it in the past 10 months, to kind of align with the prospect, like telling the prospect, hey, for internal comms, we see these challenges with SharePoint. For IT, we see those. And for users, we know this and this is not working. And like, do you agree? What do you see in your companies? What are your main pain points? And this really helps me. So as I said, like when I'm doing Valo pitches, it's 15 to 20 minutes. It's a lot of features, it's very little time, and you want the message to come through, right? So it's really important for me to understand where they are in order to tailor my pitch, because I won't show 20 features. That's not happening in 15 minutes. All right, so this is now the last step before we actually talk more about Valo intranet features and the pitch itself. Like, do you feel we covered the persona pain point part so far? Did we forget anything? Should we add something? Yeah.
If we're only focusing on main points of the Irish SharePoint, I think if we use this in one case, it's missing.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that it's the main reason.
But there's also missing a file.
Yeah. Okay. So now I want to talk about like how we've been pitching it so far. So based on that feedback I got, I'm usually starting with these personas. I'm really structuring the pitch here, and I'm starting usually with internal comms because this is where we are coming from. I really understand the persona. And these are the top 4 Valo, like it's actually not 4, it's 6, but top Valo features we saw so far for internal comms. So always starting with the Valo toolbox as like one of the most dominant features. I would talk about how content creation and SharePoint is really decentralized, complex, confusing, it's prone to errors, and it also leads to messy metadata and bad structures in the end. It's disorienting. So Valo toolbox, as you all know, really streamlined, like put three steps into one, streamlined the whole process, made it more efficient. And what it allows for internal comms is not just to be more confident, but really have this network of part-time editors where they can just really make them feel like you can do this. It's very easy. We defined which data has to be there. We defined the templates. We defined the audience groups, the targeting groups, and you publish something and it's gonna be okay. So this is one of the main features, and customers or prospects understand it really quickly. I also talk about the editor dashboard because as we talked about the decentralized structure, there's no place really in SharePoint out of the box that gives you an overview of the things you have published, of like a quick indication of if things are working, if people are actually visiting the content, and also if it's still up to date or if it's actually 3 years outdated. So let's take the employee handbook again. An editor dashboard could tell you, okay, the pages are so old, they have been visited these and these many times, and you might want to update them at some point. Then alerts, navigation, and quick links, I summarize them here as ways for communicators to really cut through the noise with important messages. So for example, when there's a crisis situation, ad hoc alert banners at the top, especially in a targeted manner, make really sure that people in SharePoint will see something and they don't have to search for it. Then quick links are more about like creating short click paths to the most relevant resources, also forcing internal comms to define what are the most relevant, in HR, what are the most relevant resources for which locations, for example. And then navigation, it sounds like such a small feature sometimes, like having the possibility to get an image and a call to action in the mega menu. But like this is a use case we do all the time, for example, at Staffbase with our front door intranet for an important event, creating maximum awareness and visibility for things that are really relevant for everybody, like Christmas party, summer camp, Staffbase camp. And then also polls is something we feel like engaging employees through Microsoft Forms is usually people are not really doing it. And just having a very user-friendly, quick way of setting up a question and getting feedback is potentially super valuable for internal comms and SharePoint, and something new, something they didn't have before. And I want to stop here for a second before going into the other personas. Is that also what you see for internal comms? Yeah, I see nodding. That's a good sign. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I think the personalization would definitely help for internal comms as well. They
Yeah.
would like to target their messaging
Yeah.
To their audience.
That's right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm actually talking about, that's right, the Valo toolbox. I mean, it's kind of the last step, right? Also to select the target group for your content. That's super valuable, yeah. Okay, looks good. IT. So with IT, I'm also talking about the Valo toolbox and content creation, but in a different way. Like I would here talk about being able to enforce the creation of the right metadata, right? Like being able to define, this is the information, these are the texts that need to be there, and this is voluntary, but making sure that the data is in place to be able to surface the content, for example, in a search hub at a later point, is often for IT crucial. Like I remember when I talked to the DHL SharePoint admin that are using Valo actually as a resource hub, he told me like metadata is everything in SharePoint. Metadata is the foundation for working and performing SharePoint, so this was extremely valuable. Navigation management can be done by SharePoint, but having a place and a proper interface for managing links and target audiences was also something IT immediately understood. Universal web part comes up a lot as well, and really like being able to create easy customizations for IT that where you would just like select basically the source code and a template, and you can make sure it's actually I just noticed that the description is wrong, but it's actually ensuring you also it won't break with the next SharePoint release. Was a big thing for IT as well, like something they can trust in, like somebody else will take care that SharePoint will keep running. And then branding and theming. These are basically lots based on requests often from internal comms. Like we want things in different colors. We want our menu in a specific color. And I see a hand there. So that's also something IT really gets and loves. Yeah. Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah.
I think not just navigation management, I would say delegation of navigation management.
Yeah.
So no longer IT has to manage the navigation
Yeah.
The owner of the intranet can
Yeah.
manage navigation.
Yeah.
And another one, so when we speak about delegation, I also think the templating
Yeah.
engine of Valo is really powerful and
Yeah.
helps. As standard SharePoint, just one template per site, and then always news editor comes up to IT,
Yeah.
can you roll out this template to all my other sites
Yeah.
as well? And now suddenly there's this whole templating
Yeah.
mechanism that works.
Yeah. And templates also mean more consistency, more control, right, over how things are being presented. That's interesting that you say that now the person who owns SharePoint can control navigation. So when I talked to the DHL SharePoint admin, he basically told me the navigation management section or the navigation admin part is the place he visits every day to clean up the navigation again. And he's an admin. And I wonder, because we also talked about ownership of SharePoint and internal comms, IT wanting to hand over ownership to internal comms. Does that, in your experience, actually happen? Like to what extent can internal comms own or co-own a SharePoint?
My book, they have to.
Okay.
We have some customers that where the content editors also got the rights to make changes within Valo
Okay.
from navigation feeds.
Okay. I also saw a hand here.
I kind of disagree with that, like, internal communications can own some information, but you want HR to only handle
Mm-hmm.
you want, IT to own the information that they own, like, it should be a shared ownership of key information, especially when you're talking about more of a library, a source of knowledge, because internal communications teams are usually very small, and they're more focused on the news and what's going on and telling stories. They don't own all of these features and the knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that also sounds like potential conflicts when this is not clearly defined, like who's owning what.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's why it's like proper governance.
Yeah.
And also the communication around who owns what and making sure people own their content.
Yeah.
That's what happens in SharePoint. People create content and then they walk away. They don't have true ownership over it.
Ownership. Okay. Ownership is a pain point. That's interesting.
There's a differentiation, I guess, between owning content and owning the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly. So I didn't mean that the internal comms should own the content of the internet, but the platform. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Anything else you would mention here for IT? Killer features, things that are very important to IT with regard to Valo intranet? Yeah. Good.
The content is stored in their own environment.
Yeah.
It's already mentioned.
Yeah. Okay.
That's really important.
Yeah.
So,
Ownership in the own environment. Yeah. All right. And then I usually switch over to the user perspective, which is, of course, one that interests IT very much as well. And like the concept of search hubs, I learned are really powerful in a SharePoint environment. Like being able to target and really tailor the search experience for employees. For example, have a search hub on marketing materials, sales collateral, employee handbook is something that really resonates with the audience so far. Automatic translations are something super relevant for global customers, very easy to explain. Customizable navigation in the form of the My Tools part of the navigation was also something IT was even actually actively looking for, being able to, first of all, customize the menu for different user groups and also enable users to create their own click path to resources. Was something they really saw as a valuable use case. And then people directory, just creating this one a source where employees can go to learn about what their coworkers are doing, what their titles are, how they can reach them, who they are reporting to, was something I'm constantly talking about. Would you agree? Do you have other things on your lists from the user perspective? there's also, I have to say, in our front door intranet, at Staffbase, of course, we're using the app and the front door intranet internally as well, and the people directory is the place I by far use the most. Okay. So what have I learned over the past month? I wanted to make it really short and concise, and also feel free to challenge me here and criticize and correct me if it's different for you. But what I saw in deals, is that although IT and internal comms, I usually saw them together, but actually was always IT leading the conversation. Even when I was referring to clear internal comms features like polls, it was IT who was like, oh yeah, and can we do this with the polls? And can we target them also? They were really in the driver's seat. Second learning, it's not about quantity, it's really about quality. There are like 15 to 20 features you can show, and it's really hard in 15 minutes, so I'm not doing this. But what I learned also from existing Valo customers and also from partners, it's usually a handful of features that are really relevant for customers. With regard to these features, we also, and it's not just because Frank showed this repositioning slide, Valo intranet as a resource library, but when talking to customers also, the features they liked the most in the so far were around knowledge management use case. So really it was a lot about the search up, people directory, metadata played a big role, navigation was always like one of the first things people mentioned. Some said we only bought Valo because of the navigation, menu management, because this was their main pain point. Yeah, and this pretty much sums up our view, or my view, and our view on these kinds of conversations and scenarios. And could you agree here? Would you challenge that? Different experiences?
I wish one was different, but I have to agree.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then the last thing, kind of, as you know, as we are in this process of understanding how Valo intranet can function as a tool set for making SharePoint especially better in findability and discoverability of content in the whole resource hub scenario, what are, from your perspective, what are features you would ask us to look deeper into? Which are features that might be there but are not fully yet in the status of really helping companies? Which are features you wish were there to make the whole experience better, specifically for that use case? Because I know Frank is here, and Patrick is here, and Tina, and Yabas, and we're really keen to learn. Like, if you were in the driver's seat now, you're like, okay, if you feel like knowledge management is a use case that will work for our customers, and we have a big development team now, what would we tell them to do? Like, what would it be from your perspective? Okay, sorry, I think I need a mic. Actually, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, I said this morning you told us that you're not going to build any more features in Valo, so it doesn't matter really, does it? It's a moot point.
That what we said and what we are doing now is what we said, slowing down innovations. So what Valo did in the past was creating a lot of features in a very broad manner, in a very unfocused way, I would say, without these specific use cases in mind necessarily. And now that we have this approach and we know, we learned what's working, what's not, we know as Staffbase where we want to go to. What we mean with repositioning is we want to test if this, and this is actually one of the first tests we're doing right now, does this new positioning work? Will it work for your future customers? Would it work for your existing customers? Would it work for you? Is that something you could sell if we're going in that direction or not? Because we have to really thoroughly evaluate what we're doing next with Valo intranet, and we actually want to gather your feedback and have you on a seat on the table. Yeah.
Well, I think with knowledge management, you have very strong competition. And the strong competition is Microsoft with Viva Topics, where the intelligence comes into knowledge management, which will be essential. And you have competition by Confluence, which is not very intelligent, but it's the market leader. We all know Wiki is not the solution for knowledge management, and it's a stupid tool. It's still a tool. But I think there's a very, very strong competition you're going into. That's not as easy as it was in the intranet market, where there was basically nothing when you started. And there you are, the market leader, so to say, in the M365 bubble. I think another thing is that one of the main trends of the future will not be, and this is also, I think, a thing for Staffbase. Like Microsoft is pushing the intelligent intranet. So where algorithms decide on what is shown to you, where it gets a little more Instagram-y, so to say. A lot of people are asking us, why can't our intranet be like Instagram nowadays? It's like flooding into a conversations app. I think that's also a step where AI is becoming more and more relevant. I know it scares comms people because you give away control. Ask the IT people 2 or 3 years ago how it feels to give away control. Get over it. It will be the future. So I think, but especially in the knowledge management market, that's a very tight niche you're going into. So interesting, but let's see if that works.
Yeah. So just to very interesting with AI. We're seeing that a lot, of course, with Viva as well. And like we have very, as Frank said, mixed feelings because Staffbase feels like, especially internal comms, is about giving more control to communicators to make sure where like they know and they can actually design where their news, content, and so on will surface and who will see it. But it's actually an ongoing debate. So what do the others say? Like, will AI rule findability and discoverability in the next few years? How do you see that?
I would like to throw a statement into the room and see what comes back. When I examine my own user behavior, I find myself falling back to search when I have not taken up the 2 clicks. So everything that I can reach within 2 clicks, I maybe use it via navigation, and anything else, I just type it in. I don't know how you guys are doing it, but even my controls on Windows, I just smash the Windows button and type in the program to search for. I don't bother to search via navigation anymore because it's way quicker that way. So my proposition certainly would be to strengthen that way of navigation.
Search-based navigation. Yeah. That's a great point. I'm doing this as well. Now I switched the past 2 years and just search for everything. PowerPoint, Office, Excel, even though it's right in front of my nose sometimes. Yeah.
Same in your phone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have no clue which app is on which page on my phone. Just search.
I actually spent some time organizing everything and still end up just using the search.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, interesting positions. Another bet on the future of good knowledge management, findability, discoverability. Yeah.
Implement a bot.
Sorry? A bot. Okay. Using bots to curate content?
And answer important questions of the employees. Okay. I have heard that many big organizations achieved a huge adoption by implementing bots because they found out that also many people were very shy to ask questions to the IT about various things.
Okay, so for specific use cases, having bots there, okay. All right, I actually have to look at the time. It's blink. Okay, I'm actually over time right now. Yes, Yabas?
You asked about AI,
yeah.
Like how we see that. I think if you have a look at InTime now, the features that has, and now it's Microsoft. many of the things that Microsoft has announced and has done like in the past, or like in the few previous months, I would say, is coming based on the AI. So AI seems to be playing a big role in helping Microsoft to speed up the development or introducing like new functionalities on the market. They talked about the designer, Microsoft Designer, that helps like, well, people to create quickly designs by entering like a name, and then that gets generated. When it comes like to knowledge management, there is Microsoft Syntax that's also like based on AI, and many of the applications that are coming are leveraging AI. So it's playing a bigger role more and more at Microsoft. So yeah.
Which shows that we have to tackle this question really carefully, right? Knowledge management in the next 5 or 10 years can mean many different things. And even here, it's not straightforward where we should go towards with in terms of features and development. So this is also one of the reasons we're lowering, like we're on hold right now and evaluating. So thank you for this first conversation. We are going to have more of that in the future, I'm sure. And thank you for your participation. Have a great day.